For the goal point component of this project, my partner and I decided to create a little mini game. So we decided to make a spaceship that you could control using the keyboard, and it would be subjected to the same gravitational forces that were defined earlier in the original project. And for the game component, we decided to have the spaceship perversely have it be destroyed as quickly as possible. And the way that would be happening is if the spaceship, which we can see here, we called Kevin, is rammed into the sun. Additionally, the game can end if our spaceship goes out of bounds or outside the screen, and in which the game would also end and you would have to retry.
So let's talk a little bit more about how exactly we implemented this stuff. So we created a subclass called Spaceship Extreme, which is a subclass of the body class we made originally for the project. We wanted to get the user input for what keys were being pressed, so we looked up a lot of different ways to try this. We tried things like key listener, but it did not work. So we looked up standard draws documentation and we found very useful functions. One of them checked whether or not a key had been pressed. Another function checked which key had been pressed and returned it as a character. So we used these two methods together and we were able to determine which key a user had pressed, and we correspondingly changed the velocity of the spaceship based on that. We use WASD, with W representing up, A representing left, S representing down, and D representing right. And then we would increase or decrease the velocity of those directions correspondingly. So as we're going to show here, we're going to run the simulation again. And as you can see, Kevin's moving around, but we can control his movements using the arrow keys.
In order to determine whether the game had ended, we created two non-static variables. The first we called out of bounds, and this variable's value would be set to true if Kevin's position went out of bounds or outside the position of the screen. The second variable we made was called destroyed, and this value was set to true if Kevin the spaceship's position was equivalent to the position of the sun, and thus it had been destroyed.
In order to determine whether or not the spaceship was out of bounds or if it had hit the sun, we took the height and width of the spaceship, divided it by 2, and added it to the x and y position of the spaceship, which was at the very center of the spaceship. This meant that we were able to get the positions for the top, bottom, right, and left edges of the spaceship. And using this information, we checked whether or not these edges were at a position such that it was touching the sun. As you saw there, we ran the spaceship into the sun, and when this happens, we change destroyed to true. We do not redraw any of the planets. We display this message: the sun is very hot. You survived 513 while loop cycles. A while loop cycle is just an arbitrary unit of time we determined that is represented by time elapsed divided by dt, and this is equal to the number of times the while loop executed. Very similarly, to check if the spaceship went out of bounds, we got the height, width of the spaceship, divided it by 2, added it to the xy positions, and we're able to get the edges, and then we checked whether or not these were greater than the radius of the universe. If it was, then we would change out of bounds to true, and similarly, we would not redraw the planets, and we would display a message that says out of bounds.
So in conclusion, my partner and I had a lot of fun implementing the extra parts of this project. So we learned a lot about how to use the Java language, but also how important it is to correctly Google things about documentation or just how to find the code that you want to implement that fits the specificity of your project specs. And we also learned how to use OBS Studio and had a lot of fun working on this project. So thank you.